I've been reading stories on Reddit for a while, and I never imagined that I'd have one of my own to share. I'm still processing everything, so I guess I'm looking for some perspective, maybe some validation, or maybe just a place of vent. Let me start by saying that I'm 35 now, and for a long time I was beginning to think that finding a good, honest story would be difficult. I spent months planning my exit instead of confronting her when she was at work. I moved everything out and left her with just a note. I'm not one of those nice guys who complain about being friend-zoned. I'm a pretty straightforward, no-nonsense kind of guy who works in construction, and I'm good at my job and make decent money. But in my previous relationships, I always felt like I was giving it my all, and it wasn't enough. I was the person who remembered anniversaries, brought flowers without any reason, listened to them, really listened to what they had to say, and tried to be understanding and supportive, but it always seemed to end the same way. I became so cynical about the whole relationship thing because I honestly felt that good qualities were no longer valued after I was hurt, that I began to think that maybe all the good stuff and all the effort just didn't matter anymore. I was not looking, and then about 5 years ago, I met Jessica, who was 33 at the time. It wasn't some dramatic meet cute or anything. We met through a mutual acquaintance at a casual get-together, and it was very matter-of-fact, but I remember I spent a good portion of the evening talking to her because I was drawn to her smile, which was real and not forced or fake. We started dating about 3 months later, and during those early days, there was a lot of excitement to see each other. I always made sure to put effort into everything, even down to what we were wearing. At first, I thought the relationship was just a casual fling, but after a while, I started to feel like I had a chance. For a while there, Jessica was different, but we had a lot in common, like hiking and trying out new restaurants, and we also had our interests, which I felt was healthy. I'm into classic cars, restoring them, going to shows, and that kind of thing, and she found it mildly interesting, which was okay with me. She was really into pottery, making all kinds of bowls and vases, and I appreciated her art even though I didn't have the patience to do it myself. It gave us things to talk about and allowed us to learn from each other. Our jobs were unique in the beginning, and that plays a part in this story later on. As I mentioned, I work in construction, and I spend most of my days physically working on site. It's hard work, but it's honest work, and I'm proud of what I do. Jessica, on the other hand, worked in sales. She sold software, and her performance was evaluated by how much she sold at first. Initially, she was in an office. I was always proud of her and always encouraged her to finish her work so that she could get that promotion. We were going places. I'm going to be honest here. I've always considered myself to be a good partner. I'm not bragging, but I try to be attentive to provide protection and to be there for my partner in the workplace. After a while, her company started offering a work-from-home option, which she jumped on at first. I've had partners in the past where I had persistent doubts and suspicions that they might not be being completely honest, but with Jessica, it was different. I'm not saying infidelity is impossible, but it wasn't something I actively worried about. I genuinely believed we had something special, something built on trust and mutual respect, which is why what happened later hit me so hard. Being emotive, supportive, spontaneous, and yes, good in the bedroom are all things I can do. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly why Jessica started acting strange, but I noticed that she was becoming more secretive with her phone, hiding the screen when I passed, taking calls in another room, and was less interested in spending time with me. She kept saying that she was tired all the time, even on the weekends when we usually made plans. At first, I dismissed it, assuming that she was under stress from her job, where she had been working hard for a promotion. I kept telling myself not to make assumptions because it's probably nothing I wanted. The strange behavior continued for a whole week with only brief glimpses of the Jessica I knew, which was enough to keep me hanging on and make me think maybe I was overreacting. But even then, I didn't immediately think she was cheating. I would rather not think it was anything serious. My initial reaction was simply curiosity. I wanted to know what was going on with her and why she seemed so distant. I was completely blind to the bigger picture at this point. Having a personal crisis, perhaps she was concealing a health issue or something similar. One Saturday night, while we were watching a movie as we usually did, she appeared preoccupied and kept checking her phone. When I questioned her about it, she told me it was work emails, which was unusual for her to do on a Saturday night. After a while, my anxiety began to grow, and I ended up discussing it with my friend James. James is a good guy, but he can be a little cynical, especially when it comes to relationships. He had gone through a very messy divorce a few years prior, which somewhat tainted his perspective on everything. I told him what was happening, and he simply laughed. "I'll never forget this dude," he said, "because if she's a woman, she can cheat on you regardless of how good you are or how much you do for her. They all have it in them." He even said, "You could have it all, great job, great looks, but you could never be certain." That statement, as harsh as it was, truly got to me. It entirely changed my perspective, making everything Jessica did seem suspicious. I was worried and curious to the point where I actively suspected she was having an affair because I couldn't stop thinking about James's words. I decided I couldn't live with this constant feeling that something was wrong, so I decided to find out what was happening. I knew about Reddit, and all the advice I found online said to check the phone. so if things didn't improve, I would do that. I prepared a nice dinner, made her favorite dish, lasagna, which we used to make together when things were good, and even set the table while I waited for her to get home. And after we ate, I brought it up to her. I told her that I was worried about her because she had been acting strangely, and I just wanted to know what was going on. Then I asked her bluntly, "Are you cheating on me?" She looked shocked, her hands began to shake, and she struggled to find the right words. It was painful to watch because eventually she denied it, saying that she couldn't believe I would even ask her if she loved me. She started crying almost hysterically during the entire performance, but the problem was that I didn't believe her. Perhaps it was Jane's words echoing in my head, or perhaps it was my intuition, but something didn't feel right. I expected her to be furious that I would accuse her of such a thing, but instead she seemed more deflated, as if she was just sad that I had even considered it. She was also far too quick to accept my apology when I said I apologized for accusing her, which didn't add up, so I did something I'm not proud of. This was a calculated move on my part because I knew that if I wanted to get to the bottom of things, I needed her to think I trusted her again and let her down. I knew what I was going to do, but I had to wait for the right moment. It was going to be a long night, and everything was building to what I knew I had to do. I was not going to have peace until I knew what was going on. I felt like I had to do it. I pretended to believe her, apologized once more, told her I was just being paranoid, and we went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I waited until I was positive Jessica was asleep, which was around 3:17 a.m. because she had another thing coming. My phone stated that I had been lying there for hours staring at the ceiling, feeling sick to my stomach and my heart racing, but I knew I had to do it. I carefully got out of bed, took her phone off the nightstand, and went into the bathroom. I opened her messages and began scrolling, first to her gallery and then to her. I clicked on the conversation and my world kind of fell apart. The messages were from someone named Ethan, and they were graphic pet names, dirty talk about how much they missed each other, and even some pictures that were almost nude, like "can't stop thinking about your smile" and other things. That's when I saw it, a contact named Harry's Plumbing. Why would Jessica be texting a plumber at all hours of the night? I knew right away that it was a fake name, a cover. It was so obvious and juvenile that it nearly made me laugh. They hadn't stated that they had slept together yet, but the emotional intimacy and suggestive messages were all there. It was an affair, plain and simple, and it had been going on for at least 2 weeks, which coincided perfectly with when she started acting strangely. Ethan and Jessica both winked and replied, "You're making it difficult to focus on work, you know." There was even a picture of Jessica wearing some new lingerie she had purchased with the words, "Wish you were here to take this off me." I felt like I was about to have a panic attack because of the messages I was receiving. My heart was racing, I was hyperventilating, and my hands were shaking so much that I could hardly hold the phone. I even considered finding this Ethan guy, but I won't go into details because they weren't pretty. I was devastated, angry, and heartbroken all at once because I had invested 5 years in this relationship, and it was all a lie. I kept asking myself how she could have done this if any of it was real, and if she had ever truly loved me. Reality had been shattered, and while I was relieved that I had learned about it relatively early on before we were married or had children, I was also furious at the way she had done it. The childish code names, the dumb emojis, and I felt like I was losing control of the situation. I knew I had to leave the place, get some air, and figure out what to do next. I spent the next hour recording everything I could, taking notes and screenshots, and making sure I had everything recorded. Once I had done so, I had to come up with a strategy. The loud and public options were to tell all our parents, post everything online for everyone to see, or distribute flyers at her workplace. The quiet options were to leave without saying anything, contact a lawyer, or simply move out. I knew I wanted her to feel the pain she had caused. I realized that I had a lot of leverage in this situation because I am very financially stable, I am in a union, and I have all the security that comes with it. I sat down on the bathroom floor and started thinking about everything. I wasn't sure how to proceed. I was furious, and I had many thoughts in my head. I knew that I was the one who made it easier for her to live in the pricey city where we lived, but without my income, Jessica would struggle. This gave me some ideas, and I knew that I could get by just fine without her. So here I am on Reddit, a mess, hurt, angry, and trying to figure out what to do next. I know I need to end things, but I'm not sure how. A lot has happened since my last post, and I know many of you were waiting for an update. I can tell you that a lot has happened since then. I apologized for the wait, but I needed some time to clear my head and make sure I was making the right choices. I wanted to make sure this would be a clean split. The first few weeks after learning about the affair were terrible. I was cold and distant from Jessica, sleeping in separate rooms, and I hardly spoke to her at all. When I did, it was in short, clipped sentences. I was unable to look at her without feeling angry and disgusted, and I hardly ate anything because I simply could not understand the things she did. You never truly know someone until you've lived with them for a long time and witnessed both their best and worst sides. Now that I have first-hand experience with this, I decided to wait until our lease was up in about 3 months, and it was in my name. I reasoned that this would be the best time to make my move because it would give me time to organize, get my ducks in a row, and maximize the impact of my actions. I'm so glad Jessica and I weren't married because I avoided a bullet there. I found a new apartment that was more affordable and closer to my place of employment. I also needed to start gathering boxes and ask some friends for help with the move. It was a lot to do, but I had a plan. Oh, and a month or so after I checked her phone, I discovered that Jessica and Ethan had slept together. To be honest, it just made things easier for me. It eliminated any remaining doubt or temptation to try to work things out. It was the last nail in the coffin. To put it another way, cheaters usually lose. I was beginning to gather myself and get the final plan ready to go, but once the forbidden part of the affair was over, I had a feeling that Jessica and Ethan's relationship wouldn't last because it was just a fantasy based on lies and deceit. Alright, so the last month of the lease came around, and it was time to go. I had been planning this for months, and I was prepared, so I chose a day when I knew Jessica was supposed to be working late. She told me she had some big client dinner or something, but I honestly didn't even care whether that was true or not. My friends, who knew the entire story, including James, were more than happy to help. They had been telling me for weeks that I deserved better, that I needed to move on, and that they were there for me regardless of what good guys I was doing. Having them support me made me feel much better about what I was doing. We met at the apartment early in the afternoon. I had already packed up the majority of my belongings in boxes and clearly labeled them so I would know what we worked on quickly. I wanted to leave her with as little as possible because I wanted her to feel the emptiness and void I'd been feeling for months. The new apartment was closer to my work, which was a bonus. It was smaller but clean, and it was mine just for a fresh start. We loaded the truck with everything that was mine, which honestly was about 80% of the stuff in the apartment. Electronics, kitchen, clothes, tools, and everything else. It was surprisingly quick. Even though I had a lot of stuff, I remember looking around the apartment before we left. It was nearly empty, with only a few pieces of furniture that Jessica had brought into the relationship. It looked sad, but it felt good. I felt a strange mix of sadness and angst knowing that I was doing this, but I also felt liberated because I was finally free. Before I left, I did one last thing. I took a piece of paper and wrote a brief, simple note saying goodbye and to have fun with Ethan. I debated for a long time about what to write, if anything. I considered writing a lengthy, irate letter spilling out all of my hurt and frustration, but ultimately I decided that less was more. The note was brief and to the point, so I put it on the kitchen counter where she would see it when she walked in. I know it sounds cliché, but it felt right. I even considered saying something more sarcastic, but I decided against it. My friends helped me unpack a few of the necessities at the new place, but I told them I could handle the rest. I needed some alone time to process everything and adjust to my new surroundings. Thanked them once more for their assistance, and they left. Then came the difficult part, the ghosting. As soon as Jessica got home and discovered the note, my phone began to ring and send texts and messages on all social media platforms. You can imagine that she was in a panic, going from angry accusations to tearful requests for forgiveness in a matter of hours. She even attempted to get in touch with me through mutual friends, pleading with them to step in. But I never returned her calls, texts, or messages. Of my retaliation, if you can even call it that, total silence. I wanted her to experience the same bewilderment, uncertainty, and helplessness that I had when I learned about her affair. 3 weeks have passed since I moved out, and I haven't spoken to her at all. I'm enjoying picturing her panic. I'm sure she is freaking out. 2 days after I moved out, I received a call from the landlord who was perplexed and wanted to hear my side of the story. When he called me on my cell, I told him the truth. I told him about the affair with Ethan, how I had moved out because I couldn't live with a cheater, and that I wouldn't be renewing the lease. The landlord was surprisingly understanding because he had known me for a few years, and I had always been a good tenant who paid my rent on time and never caused any problems. I think he appreciated my honesty. I also told him that I was forfeiting the security deposit because I didn't want a dime of it back. The landlord told me something that made me feel a strange sense of satisfaction. Jessica couldn't afford the apartment on her own, she didn't have a roommate lined up, and her family lived too far away to be of any assistance. She was facing eviction and was frantically searching for a new place to live, which was a direct result of her actions. I trusted the landlord to conduct a thorough walkthrough of the apartment and make his own decision about whether she deserved any of it back. Actions of her betrayal, and I won't lie, it felt good to know that I know some people might think I'm being cruel if I feel sorry for Jessica. But in all honesty, I don't. I gave her everything I had. I was a good partner, faithful and supportive, and she threw it all away for some cheap thrill. She made her decisions, and now she must live with the consequences. It's not about the money, the apartment, or even the things I took. It's about the hurt she caused me, the disrespect she showed me, and the landlord did the walkthrough and informed me that everything was fine and that he would be returning my security deposit. I was happy to hear that he served Jessica with the eviction notice and that he was pleased with my handling of the situation. I thanked him again and told him that I was glad to be moving on at last. People advised me to block Jessica and move on, so that's that. However, you can't have the best of both worlds. Exactly what I did in Update 3. A month has passed since the last update, and Jessica has attempted to contact me once more after I blocked her. She called me on a blocked number, and when I checked the voicemail, I knew it was her. I called the number back, and Jessica answered right away. She broke down, apologizing profusely and saying she had nowhere to go. Her voice sounded exhausted and defeated, and it was clear she realized she couldn't deny the affair any longer. She kept saying, "I'm sorry." She repeatedly apologized and offered weak, unpersuasive explanations, saying that it just happened and that I wasn't meant for it. It was pathetic, and she even attempted to appeal to my past emotions by reminding me of all the wonderful times we had spent together. "Don't you still care about me at all?" she asked, her voice cracking, desperate to get me to change my mind. She began to express how uncertain she was about her future, saying she didn't know what she was going to do and that she had nowhere to go. I listened to her for a few moments, please, because I wanted her to understand the full impact of what she had done and the weight of her actions. Then, when I said, "It's funny that you spent weeks or months sneaking around lying to my face, and now you expect me to feel sorry for you," I paused once more to let my words sink in. "You made your decisions, destroyed what we had, and now you're paying the price." I delivered the final, decisive blow, and I said, "You have Ethan." I went live with him, and then I hung up. I didn't give her a chance to argue, respond, or plead. I just ended the call in the middle of her sentence. If she even tried, there was no turning back. I went through all of my social media accounts, including Facebook and Instagram, and blocked her there as well. I completely erased her digital presence from my life, just as completely as I had removed her physical presence from my apartment. I even thought about deleting old messages and photos, but I chose to keep them for now as a reminder of what I'd been. I felt a strange calmness come over me as I sat back, not a rush of elation or a surge of triumph, but a quiet, steady sense of closure. It was as if a burden I had been carrying for months had finally been released, and I began to justify my actions to myself, not to anyone else, but to myself. I don't know where she'll go, I thought, and honestly, I don't care. She made her bed. She can lie in it. I reaffirmed my belief that she deserved whatever hardship came her way, and I didn't see it as an act of retaliation, but rather as a natural. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but I also wouldn't shield Jessica from the consequences of her actions if she ends up on the streets because she deserves it. That was my last thought on the matter. She had betrayed me, lied to me, and destroyed our relationship. She had to face the reality of that without me to cushion the blow. I knew the pain I'd gone through, the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, and the feeling of being completely worthless, evidence of my utter lack of empathy for her.